Hello, everybody. So today I'm going to be talking about digital forensics. Before we get into it, I want to say thank you to Will Peteroy and Blackthorn Consulting for providing us with some of this information. Blackthorn Consulting is a digital forensics agency or consulting firm, and he teaches this class at MSU. For those of you who haven't met me, I'm Andrew Fallon. I'm a master's/PhD student studying distributed energy resource cybersecurity at Montana State. Before I was that, I was a software engineer for a government contractor in Connecticut called Sonalists. And before that, I got my bachelor's actually here at Washington State in computer science. So today, the outline for the things we're going to be doing, I'm going to give a introduction to digital forensics, what it is, what is digital evidence, what is digital data. We're going to go through some principles that are going to guide an investigation if you were a digital forensics analyst. Then we're going to go through the process of conducting an investigation, how to do it, the steps that go into that if you were one of those practitioners. Then we'll talk about digital evidence and how you would capture digital evidence. Talk a little bit about memory forensics and the two tools that we're going to be using today, Volatility 2 and 3, and some of the common plugins when we dive in and actually start working with these tools. And then our hands-on tutorial. So we'll do some setup. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get these systems set up for you guys beforehand. So I'll put the instructions up and we'll work through them together after I finish talking. And then I'll walk us through some common plugins, how we can use them, what they're going to do. And then I'm going to put instructions up for a lab and I'll let you guys have at it and see if you can find digital evidence for the lab we have going. And that'll be more or less individual. I think the way we're going to do it is be like, hey, everybody work through step one. When everybody's done, we'll come back and work through that. Before we get too far into it, I am going to throw a little disclaimer up. I am not a digital forensic analyst. I am a power system cybersecurity guy. Clem and I just think that this is a really cool tool. I'm going to give you a brief introduction into the world of digital forensics that I didn't know about until last year. And if you guys didn't know about it, hopefully you find this as fun as I do. So first things first, what is digital forensics? Anybody want to throw out some options? If you know it, go ahead. If you don't, take a guess. Is
it basically dissecting over malware or tampering of some sort?
Definitely an aspect of it. Anybody else? So we're going to talk about some quick quotes. Well, not quotes for digital evidence, but digital forensics is the collection, analysis, and interpretation of digital evidence. So yes, we're looking for malware, but we're also looking for what happened. How did they get into the system? Can we kick them out? And maybe we are collecting all of this for a law enforcement investigation, or we're going to be using this in a court of law. Right? So there's a bunch of processes that we have to go through. So what is digital evidence then? We're going to go through 3 quick quotes that talk about digital evidence. I think these are interesting. But digital evidence is any data stored or transmitted using a computer that support or refute a theory of how an offense occurred or that address critical elements of an offense, such as intent or an alibi. I think this is kind of a mouthful. I do like it. It's very descriptive. But we have a couple more that are a little more simple. Digital evidence is information and data of investigative value that are stored or transmitted by a computer. Or digital data that supports or refutes a hypothesis about digital events or the state of digital data. So really what we're looking for digital evidence is the who, the what, the where, the when, how did they get into the system? And we're forming hypotheses based off of these and presenting that data to whoever our stakeholders are. So what are some types of digital data? And I want people to think super broad. We're not talking about like file systems or file types or emails. Throw out some types of digital data.
Images.
Sure, I think we can get even more high level than that. That's good, but
System level,
yeah, okay.
IP address.
Again, we're going much higher level. That is a type of digital data, but we want to like, where are we getting digital data? Computers, computer systems, right? These are super high level play.
I'm pretty sure that's hardware, not data.
It is where we get the digital data. It is part of the system that is digital data in digital forensics.
Yes, but like your question was data.
In digital forensics, this is what it is. So computers, laptops, servers, our standard in our open computer systems, we've got our hard drives, our RAM, right? Our digital data that we're looking for is anything that gives us this data or the evidence. So network communications are all part of this. Our embedded devices, mobile devices, smart devices, et cetera. These are all going to be where we go looking for our digital evidence if we see that there is a breach. So with that, let's go into some of the principles of digital forensics. We're going to roughly cover 8 of these. And the first one is certainty. Just like in statistics where we can't say this is a 100% probability that something is going to happen. In digital forensics, it's not our job to be 100% certain that somebody got into the system in certain ways, right? It's not our job to necessarily defend our point. We are presenting possibilities and the evidence that back those up. If we give this to a lawyer, prosecutor, or defender, right, it is their job to prove whether or not this is true. So we are going to create hypotheses, and we are going to find evidence that support or refute those, and then give them to somebody else to defend our conclusions, right? Our second one is evidence exchange. So this gentleman in the black and white up here is Dr. Edmund Locard. He was one of the pioneers of forensic science back in like the 1880s or something like that. And he came up with this exchange principle that states contact between 2 items will result in an exchange of some sort, right? When he came up with this principle, he's mostly talking about criminals. So a criminal is going to commit a crime and they're going to leave behind some evidence because they were there at all, right? This works twofold in digital forensics. An attacker is going to leave behind evidence that they were in a system, but also we are interacting with that same system. So we need to be careful that we are not we're not influencing this system. We're not leaving too much evidence behind that we were there. And if we are documenting that so that if we are documenting everything that we've done, everything we've touched in this system, so that that doesn't invalidate our findings. Our next principle is evidence characteristics. This is less about guiding principles of getting distracted. This is less about high level view, but more guiding our investigation, right? So what are some similar traits between groups of items is our class characteristics, right? So if we see an exe file, we know that's an executable. So we know that is doing something on the system. Is it executing commands that we want, or is it malware, right? This is going to direct where our investigation is going. Similarly, we've got individual characteristics like MAC addresses or IP addresses. This is going to help tell us who is doing something. So class characteristics of evidence is going to tell us like what is going on, and the individual characteristics are going to tell us who. Should this person be in the system? Forensic soundness. This is really how is the evidence handled. This kind of goes back to Locard's exchange principle a little bit, right? If we are interacting with the system, we need to be careful that we're not changing things. There's principles of non-modification. We don't want to change any of the data. We want to make sure that everything stays the way it was before we started interacting with it. We need, and how do we do this? I mentioned it earlier, documentation. We need to document when somebody has access to the data, what tools we were using, the methods we were using. All of this is going to go into being defensible in a court of law at some point, or proving to stakeholders that something has happened and that we weren't the ones who caused it. Similar to that, we have authentication. Authentication helps with forensic soundness. We need to show that the integrity of our analyzed data, or we need to maintain the integrity of our analyzed data and our records. We must be able to show that the contents are unchanged, that the information is coming from where we say it's coming from, and that our extraneous info, like date of collection, et cetera, that stuff is accurate. And also along those lines, in the like our extraneous info, chain of custody is super important. We're getting the data probably from some client or some company, maybe law enforcement, and we need to show that we get it. We either, if we give it to somebody else or ask other people for help when conducting our investigation, that we're documenting that as well. This is all going into making sure our conclusions aren't invalid, and to show that the evidence wasn't tampered with outside of our control. Along with authentication as well, we've got evidence integrity. So we need to show that the evidence we have collected has not been modified since we collected it. The main way that this is done is through message digests or hashes, right? So we know that if we have a hash, if we have some evidence and we input it through a hashing algorithm, we're going to get the same hash back as long as nothing has been changed. So this is going to make sure that our evidence integrity is, our evidence hasn't changed since we collected. Most of the time, this is SHA-256 is being used, but digital forensics, there aren't a ton of tools necessarily available out there for people to use. So if one tool has some functionality that you need that other tools don't, and they might have MD5 or SHA-1, but your hands are kind of tied at that point. You're going to have to use those hashes because the tool that you're using is going to give you the data that you want. And the last crucial step is repeatability, right? This, our evidence has to be able to be independently verified. This is we're going to keep going back to the court of law sort of example, right? If the prosecutor has some evidence, the defense is going to want to also independently verify that that evidence came from where the prosecution is saying it came from, right? So by documenting everything, every step you take, we can say that something is, by documenting everything, our conclusions go all the way back to where we started from. So this leads us into conducting an investigation. What we've covered so far really is what is digital data, what is digital evidence. We've talked about some key principles to guide our investigation. So let's go into some of these steps that are the steps that are going to go into conducting said investigation. Does anybody want to take a guess at what the first step of an investigation is going to be?
Figure out what the system, what's in the system currently, and duplicate it and make it back as well.
Oh, that's a little farther down the chain.
What's our starting point here?
Very start of the investigation. We don't even have data yet.
Presumably, we are familiar with what the investigation is on.
You would have to essentially like log everything down, like the same way you technically do with the crime scene, where it's like make sure nothing else is coming in.
Kind of. That's also a little further down the chain.
Do we even know who the perpetrator is?
No, we don't. That is part of the investigation.
There's
Macy,
someone to give you the data.
there you go. Somebody's going to hire us to find stuff. Or we're going to have to figure out, we're going to have to set up our chain of command, our chain of custody, like we said, we need to be documenting everything for this digital forensics investigation. So if it's us and we have gotten the data, right, we still need to be able to set up our communications. Where did we get the data? Who gave it to us? If that's us, that's an easy answer. If it's from a company, we need to figure out who the stakeholders are, the shareholders, right? Who do we contact if we have more questions about the data that we have been given? We need to set up our incident reporting mechanisms if we find for this incident, for the thing we've been hired to look into. Issues tracking software if we run into any problems while we're conducting our investigation. Ooh. Ooh, what are you doing? Sorry, everybody. I don't know what happened. We're going to set up our encryption software to make sure our evidence is safe and hasn't been changed. We're going to set up our war room. This is where we're going to conduct all of the evidence, collection, everything we're going to be doing. When somebody was explaining this to me, they basically said we're going to go into a conference room and lock the door and not come out until we figure things out, depending on the timeline. And then secure storage facility. This just goes into evidence integrity or that our records haven't been changed. We need to document every time somebody comes in and out of the storage facility or pulls the evidence out. And so to guide the rest of our investigation, I like this little graphic. This is the attack life cycle. So for the most part, every attack is going to follow this fun little graphic. We're going to have how they got into the system, and then their goal is going to be to escalate their privileges until they can, they're going to escalate their privileges until they can accomplish their goal, whether that be to disrupt business. We talked a lot about this morning about industrial control systems, right? Whether that is that shutting down the power. Are we conducting corporate espionage and stealing a bunch of data from people, right? So we're going to escalate our privileges. If we don't have the privileges to accomplish our goal, we're going to perform some reconnaissance and move laterally throughout the system and escalate our privileges again.
Wouldn't you want to do like some kind of reconnaissance before you being constantly like fully get into their system, like that perimeter?
Absolutely, yeah. That is part of the beginning here, perimeter compromise, getting into the system, right? But once you're in the system, if you don't have the privileges you want to accomplish the goal, whether that be to shut down the power or to steal data, you're going to want to perform reconnaissance to figure out how you're going to move laterally in the system. And once you do that, you'll escalate your privileges again and keep moving forward until you have the correct privileges to do whatever you're doing in the system. The reason that it's important for us to know the attack life cycle is so that we can think through, think like an attacker. So our next step is to think about attack vectors, right? How we have our system now, we have our data. Somebody has said we think there's a compromise. We need to think about how they got into the system. Anybody want to throw out some attack vectors? Yeah, for sure. Legacy systems. Maybe there's some vulnerability in there that nobody's patched.
Rising emails.
Phishing.
Phishing emails.
Yeah, phishing emails are one. Other ones, USB devices, right? That's how they got into Stuxnet. That's how they got Stuxnet into the system.
Vulnerable services.
Yeah, absolutely. I think. Yeah, vulnerable services that haven't been updated. Those are all attack vectors. And the reason we're thinking about this is because we need to consider at this point, we just know that the system has been compromised. We don't necessarily know how it has been compromised, where they got in. Sometimes a client or somebody might just come up to me and say, hey, my computer is acting funny, and I don't know why, right? We need to figure out where they got in. Computers have a lot of data in them, and trying to figure this stuff out without any sort of direction gets odious. Some other attack vectors, improper usage, has our training failed? Are our employees not doing their jobs properly? Or did somebody get their laptop stolen, right? All of these are things that we need to consider. If somebody got their laptop stolen, well, we know that somebody broke in via that, more than likely. Our next step in the process is to look at the precursors to an incident, right? These are like James said, maybe there is a relevant vulnerability that hasn't been patched that we just heard about. Maybe Windows says, hey, there's a vulnerability that's shown up and it's on your system, right? Well, that seems like a pretty good indicator that somebody might have used that. Web server logs can indicate the presence of unauthorized vulnerability scanning, people just checking to see if there's holes in the system. Or, a threat group actually coming in and saying, hey, we're going to attack you and try to steal all of your data. Those are all precursors to an incident, hints that an incident could be coming or could have been coming that nobody paid attention to. The next thing we're going to look at are indicators of a compromise. So it's time to see, is there any indication that the system has been compromised, other than something hinky is going on, right? So some indicators of a compromise are alerts from our intrusion detection systems. Those are pretty glaring, but if the intrusion detection system didn't catch it, we can look at logs and see if there's anything suspicious, or did an audit catch entries for some key services, right? Maybe there are some unauthorized configuration changes in the system that nobody noticed. And now that we're looking into it, we're like, that's a little weird. Maybe that shouldn't be there. And multiple failed login attempts, right? These aren't necessarily saying that by finding these or thinking about these aren't saying that an intrusion or a compromise has occurred. We're just looking to see if it could have occurred. And could these be some of the reasons? At this point, we're also going to start moving into analysis of the system. We need to document nominal behavior of our system. So that we know exactly where the system is acting weird, right? We need to see figure out how normal events happen. We need to see perform event correlation, right? See if this event happens, typically we'll see B event happen. But if we see an event happen between those two, that's a bit suspicious, right? And we're going to start creating this knowledge base that we can keep returning to as we dive into the system. And we also can use the internet for research. Because we've gone through and figured out what the precursors are, we found some indicators. Maybe we go and see if we've seen those before. Common vulnerability, CVEs, CWEs, right? We can leverage those to guide our evidence collection, which we're still trying to figure out. This is all before we're gathering evidence, right? We're trying to guide our investigation. And because we've gone through all this, maybe we can go back to the client and say, hey, we found this. Can we have some extra information, extra data on these aspects of the system? Because this is where we think the compromise has occurred. And we can get help from others. This is where chain of command comes in. Maybe we know, from my understanding, the digital forensics community is not very big. So you might know somebody who has dealt with a vulnerability, that you're seeing now before, and you might bring them in on the project, right? But then we have to make our chain of custody considerations. And then obviously this is documentation is through this entire process. But we've now come to a point where we can gather a bunch of our documentation, the current status of our incident, summary of events so far, what we think, some of the indicators of a compromise, and our related incidents. All of this documentation we can then take to our client if we haven't been necessary communication with them so far.
For the actual documentation process, is
Mhm.
that something where you have like a standard operating procedure where it's like a certain form for a certain thing, or is it more like you just type what you're doing on board?
Typically, there's a certain form for a certain thing, as far as I know. For example, I think for Blackthorn Consulting, right, they're the digital forensics group who gave us a lot of this information. Internally, they will have a documentation process that is going to keep the digital forensic analyst out of hot water, because I think there is a law against like there's unlawful collection if you have not been given the proper authorization to dig into the data, and also keep within legal compliance if you're bringing this into a court of law. So whatever the consulting group is or the people conducting it, the forensic analysis, they're going to have processes in place to make sure that they are fully compliant. And yeah, all of these things are also going to be in our documentation. After this, we have a decent idea of where the vulnerability possibly could be, where the malware might be hiding. Now we need to think about prioritization. Prioritization of the system is really thinking about what is the impact that this malware or this incident is having on our system. Is it a functional impact? Is it going to start killing our computers? Is it an information impact? Or are we just bleeding data at this point, right? Are people stealing our documents? Or are we more worried about the recoverability of our system? How long is it going to take to get the system back online, right? So, for example, with the functional impact, right? If we know that this is going to be killing computer systems, well, that's going to be our priority. We need to work on containment first and make sure that it can't spread, and make sure that it can't kill more computers. If it's data, we need to plug those holes first. And all of this is happening within the first, couple days of the investigation, if anything, right? We're trying to figure out where the vulnerability is, maybe what the malware is, but what systems it's affecting so that we can shut that down, and then we can go into evidence collection. After this process, after we've done prioritization, we're going to bring the evidence to the stakeholders and see what they want us to do. We're going to have our suggestions. If it's a functional impact, we're going to say, hey, these are the things we need to do. Please get back to us super quickly. Depending on the vulnerability, we might need to notify compliance bodies or FBI or CySER, right? Could the vulnerability or the incident that we're seeing affect other things other than the people who hired us? After that, we now have our direction. We have our next steps. We're on to containment. We need to make sure that we're not breaking any more systems and we're not losing any more data. Some strategies these strategies are going to vary. We need to balance what the company and the business can actually accomplish, with what they can actually accomplish, and prevent additional damage and theft, and think about how we're going to be collecting evidence, right? We could just unplug the computer or, drill some holes in a hard drive if that's the only affected one, but now we don't know what happened or how they got in, right? We have some ideas, but we don't have evidence that this is how it's happened. So we need to basically build walls around them so they can't move laterally in our system. So they can't move laterally in our system, and we can start then collecting evidence and also kick them out of our system. Premature containment can lead to an adversary not being fully evicted, right? If we have not conducted any sort of root cause analysis or figured out how they got in, then we can do containment and prevent them from moving any further, or at least we think we did. And they're still in our system and they're still moving around. And we have to start most of the process over again because now they have exploited a different way or moved further into the system. Now it's time, we've figured out, we've contained them, they're not moving anymore, we can safely start gathering evidence, right? We've figured out how they got in, now we can figure out what they were doing, where the malware is, how they have persisted on our system, maybe across power cycles, right? And we can start, we can fully identify our attacking hosts. We've looked at root causes. We're going to look deeper into root causes. And we can start building our timeline from the root cause to the where we have finished containment. This is our how did they get into the system? How are they sticking around sort of thing. As we're gathering evidence, after we've gathered evidence, we can also we're going to move into eradication and recovery. So we've contained them, but we haven't necessarily removed their access completely. Maybe we did during containment, maybe we didn't, but now that is our goal. We are getting them out of the system completely, plugging all the holes, and we can start bringing our systems back up to health. Any strategy, this is again, any strategy that we do for eradication and recovery needs to take into account what the business can actually do. If typically phased approaches are going to work better because we're not going to just overhaul their entire security system. We're not going to overhaul all of their security practices. But we are going to start building things up, bringing things online slowly, right? Back to normal working. And again, we need to address the root cause if we haven't already, and make sure that that cannot be exploited again. And now we're on to our final 2 steps of the investigative process. After this, we'll talk a little bit about the actual evidence gathering and the tools we're going to be using. But company-wise, we're going to talk about the lessons learned. What happened when? Did our previous trainings work, right? Did the staff and organizations perform as expected? What should the company do different next time? And what corrective actions can prevent similar incidents in the future? If somebody got in because of a phishing email, we've all done training on that, but maybe the company needs to harp on that a little bit more, or maybe we need better spam filters, right? For us, as the consulting firm, we need to do our post-incident analysis. We need to go back through and say, did we prioritize correctly, right? If it was a functional impact, if it was actually an information impact and we decided to prioritize the hardware systems, we didn't do our job as well as we could have. Did we perform as expected? Did we make the right call, right? And at this point, we have given our data over to whoever, our evidence and our data over to whoever needs it. Maybe that means one of our digital forensic analysts gets called into court, but the process is over. So now we'll get into a little bit of where we get the digital evidence capturing it. Yes, Caleb.
Super good question. I don't know the answer to this, but after going through that whole investigation process, how often does that work essentially, right? How often do you see or have you heard of attacks that happen and it's just boom, 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 gotcha, you're caught. You know, like in the real world with criminals, boom, boom, gotcha, you're in handcuffs, you're in jail now, right?
Yeah.
More often it's like iteration, so snap, this happened, right?
I don't know the answer perfectly. I can say from the small amount that I do know that it is very hard to catch a cyber criminal. So this is it is very hard to catch a cyber criminal. So through this process, we might not actually catch anybody, but what we did do is we figured out how they got into the system. We kicked them out of the system and we plugged the holes that they did use, right? Do you have a question?
Is it about how hard this is to capture us because it's easy for them to cover up, or is it because it's hard for them to trace it?
I think it's more hard for us as the forensic forensic analyst to trace them, right? Maybe we have an IP address, but maybe they bounced that IP address elsewhere. Or a lot of the time when we're conducting analysis, the attack is finished, right? And they could have been in the system and gotten what they want and gotten out, and we're just playing catch up, right?
What exactly can you do if the IP address leads to some VPN that doesn't take logs? Good question.
I don't have a good answer to that. Do
I
you?
don't know if anybody does.
Yeah. So I don't know how well that answered it, but
No,
yeah, like for example, Russia conducts a lot of cyber attacks on different places. It's pretty hard to tell whether or not it was Russia or whether somebody is pretending to be Russia. And a lot of the times it takes years of evidence collection to determine with any sort of, like I said, we're going to be careful not to use the word certain, but with any sort of certainty that somebody did conduct an attack. We're all pretty sure that Russia did the NotPetya attack, but we're not 100% positive. And it took several years for people to dig through the binaries or dig through the files to figure these things out. Go ahead.
sorry, like, is it more like the preparation that goes in, it's the like the evidence, like the forensic evidence, like what they do in preparation to get into the
Well,
system?
so this is actually the cool thing about what we'll be doing later or in a few minutes. The thing that's going to create the forensic evidence is we can potentially have a disk image or a memory file, right? That we can use tools to pull evidence out of, right? Of a compromised system, right? So we'll get into that a little more. But yes, a lot of the forensics is kind of the documentation of everything that we've gone through, but also, for example, later on today, we're going to have a memory file and we're going to be able to see emails that people have sent in and out, or we're going to be able to see whether or not malware was running on the system using a couple of tools. Cool. Any more questions of the process? Cool. So let's talk a little bit about digital evidence and capturing digital evidence. There's a bunch. We're going to really talk about volatile and non-volatile evidence. Does anybody know what volatile evidence is?
Maybe evidence that stays there and doesn't necessarily disappear or go away very easily.
No, it is the exact opposite of that.
Volatile evidence would have to be evidence that could easily be destroyed, i.e. some data that's currently in RAM, and if you unplug the machine.
Look at that. Good work. Yeah, volatile evidence is evidence that does not persist across power cycles. This is our RAM, right? So if somebody unplugs the computer, all of this evidence that's in RAM is gone. Everything that we could have taken is no longer there, right? Which leads us to non-volatile evidence.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. So non-volatile evidence, these are our hard drive contents, right? This does persist across power cycles. This is a lot easier to get than RAM, right? So how do we capture non-volatile evidence? Well, we need to determine a couple of things before we actually do any sort of disk capture.
So hypothetically speaking, data on the hard drive might be considered volatile if it's encrypted, because while you just broke into this guy's apartment and his computer is currently on, if that stuff's encrypted, right? Because his computer's on, it's already been decrypted, but the second you unplug the machine, it's now encrypted again and you don't have a password, and he does not have to give you that password.
That's a good point. But the data is still there. It is encrypted, and maybe we don't have access to it, but it still exists. Unlike RAM, which if you do unplug the computer, the data does not exist, right?
It exists, but it is unobtainable.
Right. So,
But if it exists, it's more volatile, right?
correct, yes. Yes, it would be considered non-technical. Because maybe somewhere down the line, a quantum computer breaks the encryption. We have that evidence, right? We have that data that we can mess with. So how do we capture non-volatile evidence? Well, we typically will have access to the hard drive or the disk, right? We need to figure a couple of things out. One, how to access the data, and two, how to power on the device, right? If the device is super damaged, right, we want to be careful with pumping electricity through it because that might kill our data. And also, how are we going to get in, right? You mentioned that the evidence might be encrypted. Do we have any way to break the encryption? How are we going to get access to it? Is anybody familiar with what a write blocker is? Yeah. Any tool that blocks, turns turns data into read-only, right? This is pretty critical when we don't want to change any of the data on these disks, right? We just want to sift through it and try to find evidence. So we'll implement write blockers so that we don't change any of the internal data, right? So there are two ways to capture non-volatile evidence. We've got physical disk capture and logical disk capture. Physical disk capture, some of the pros is we might get deleted files. I don't think everybody's familiar with how a computer necessarily deletes a file, but when you move something to trash or you delete something, all you're really doing is snipping the pointers that point to this data. And then the computer marks those files as free, right? We can't access them anymore, but the data is still on the hard drives. And as we create more files, eventually those will get overwritten because the space in the computer is free. So with physical disk capture, we're going to try to get everything. This will give us all the ones and zeros of the system, which means we have this unused space that we can then sift through and probably potentially recover these deleted files we want to look through if they haven't already been overwritten. And we can parse the entire raw disk and the data structures, right? Because we have gotten as much as we possibly can from the disk. The cons, it's both a pro and a con, but we capture used and unused disk space. This makes our output file super big.
So that last slide, would that be for like an attacker, their malware was programmed to delete its track, so like delete its file that it implemented, it would be used to recover this kind of file?
I mean, potentially, yeah, we could recover those files. Right, if they have it. Yeah.
So I've heard like stories about how, criminals just deleted everything on the hard drive and they're like, I'm fine, FBI can find me, I'll be fine, I can delete everything. And they just go on the computer and find everything anyway. Because I've heard that basically true deletion software is very time consuming, because it really has to go delete everything and then overwrite it with random stuff
Right.
and then delete that infections.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. Just moving something to trash doesn't actually delete anything for a true deletion. Essentially, it's gone until it's overwritten. It still lives on your hard drive, right? It's just marked, the space on your computer has been marked as free to then be overwritten with other things. So yes, it takes quite a bit to truly delete something, which is why if we do a full disk capture, a full physical disk capture, we can get that data and potentially recover these deleted files. But like I said, full physical disk capture is time consuming. It takes a very long time, especially if you have a really big file system. And you are going to have a huge output file to have to sift through. On the other hand, we have logical disk capture. This gets all the files from the OS's point of view. So pretty much just gives us our file system. It's quick, you get smaller output files. These are all great things. However, we're not going to get our unused disk space, and there is absolutely zero chance that we are going to take a look at any deleted files, because the unused disk space is where those deleted files live. Capturing volatile evidence is a different story. So volatile evidence, we said, doesn't persist across power cycles, right? That means we have to interact with a running system. So there are a bunch of different RAM tools. The one that I heard people were using were Velocity Surge. It's a paid service, but it gives you a lot more information for when you are doing a RAM capture. Some considerations we need to think about. When we're capturing volatile evidence, we do need admin access when we're interacting with the system. And also, I think I actually didn't mention, we're typically going to SSH into these SSH into this running system to do our RAM capture, right? We need admin access to actually do this capture. Since we're interacting with a running system and we can't implement write blockers like we did on physical disk capture, right? Or I mean, on our non-volatile evidence, we could be creating new files on disk. We need to be careful with that. And if we do, we need to document it and say, hey, we accidentally did this, right? So that this doesn't invalidate any of our findings. Also, we need to be careful of where we are sending the output file, right? If we're pulling it back down onto our machine, we need to make sure that we have enough space on our machine to take the output file, right? We don't want to crash our system or crash wherever it's going. So this leads us to where we're going to spend the rest of the day, or the rest of this period. We're going to be talking about memory forensics. So what is it? Memory forensics is gathering evidence from RAM, basically. Thinking about RAM, anybody want to say some of the evidence or the information that we potentially could get from RAM, from our randomized system? So we can get our running processes and sometimes our dead processes. So the things, when we do a RAM capture, we're getting a snapshot of the system at the moment we do the capture, right? So we can get our running processes, we can get the network connections that were happening at that moment in time. We can see some memory mapped files. We can see users' logins and credentials, the cached files. A lot of information is stored in RAM temporarily to make our lives when we interact with the computer easier. But as digital forensic analysts today, we can get access to a lot of information from RAM. Why would we want to conduct this instead of taking the entire file system? One, it can be one of the fastest ways to extract malware on a running system. So if malware is trying to persist across power cycles, it is going to get loaded up back into the RAM when we boot up. And it is going to be running to do all of its bad, nasty things in our computer. We can access the elements that are logged in our memory file, right? These things are just being stored in RAM. Data transfer volumes, our inter-host communication, our network communications. We can see that we're not going to see in a actual physical disk capture, right? We can see our command and control activity. If I remember correctly, C2, command and control, this is how a malware is going to maintain connections to your system. We can see whether or not our system has been accessed remotely, and it's pretty difficult to tamper with RAM when we have been the ones to do our volatile evidence capture. So the tool we're going to be using today is Volatility. Volatility is pretty cool. It's a modular framework. It's written in Python. It is built to do memory forensics. It's cross-platform. It runs on Windows, Mac, and Linux. We're going to be running it in Linux. Austin is here. He's going to help us get this all set up in a few minutes. Has an extensible and scriptable API. There are tons of community modules. The community is very active. We've got volatility 2 and 3. Volatility 2 isn't necessarily being supported, but there are a bunch of plugins that only run on volatility 2. I think we'll mostly be using volatility 3. But what volatility is not and does not claim to be, it does not collect memory samples. It does not have a GUI, does not have a graphical user interface. We're going to all be doing command line things. It also does not claim to be bug-free. And sometimes it does not support every operating system out of the box. It took me a while to get volatility up and running on Ubuntu recently. And thankfully, I was able to put together the things, especially with Austin's help, to get it running on our Linux systems. The plugins that Volity has, they're pretty dope. They let us take a look. Some of them are like malfind. They're going to let us look and see what is potential malware, what malware is running on the system. Like I said, they don't work with every version of volatility, but there's a super active community making different plugins. Some tools we're going to be using today, or we're going to make use of, VirusTotal. Show of hands who's heard of VirusTotal or used VirusTotal? Cool. VirusTotal is a website that lets you upload suspicious files, domains, IPs, and URLs to see if it's malware or if that hash has been seen somewhere else and is some sort of malware, right? We're going to put some files up in the VirusTotal, and you'll be able to actually see it say, oh, I think this is probably malware. It can be really useful in digital forensics, especially if we use, for example, that plugin malfind. There's a lot of false positives in that. So we're going to want to actually see if the files we are getting are malware. CyberChef. CyberChef is called the Cyber Swiss Army knife. This is going to be useful for decoding specific commands that might have been run, or see potentially whether how a malware is maintaining itself on the system or keeping connection with the attacker. We're also going to make use of Goldfinch PST viewer. So PST files are personal storage table. Microsoft uses these to store like emails and contacts and calendar events. So we're going to extract a PST file and actually be able to see some emails. But we're going to use Goldfinch to take a look at it so we don't have to put potentially malicious emails into Outlook or anything like that and run Linux. Some helpful volatility plugins. We're going to dive deeper into this, especially when I do some sort of walkthrough. But image info, it gives us information on the disk image. Volatility 2 requires a profile for us to use. So using image info, we would be able to get the operating system profile to use. PS lists the running processes that are on the system. NetScan shows us all of the connections that are on our system, or not our system, but are in our memory file. I mentioned malfind shows potentially malicious processes. PS tree, it shows the process tree, right? So our parent and child processes. Memmap/procdump. The reason both of those are up there, it's volatility 2 versus volatility 3. This dumps data for a target process into a dump file that then we can run certain commands on. And again, we'll be doing all of this in a minute. But dump files is another plugin. We can give it a process ID. Be careful not to just type out dump files without giving it a process ID, and I'll show you how to do that. But that will dump all of the files that the memory file has onto your system. You probably want to get out of that as quick as possible because that is a lot of data that we don't want. Things to look out for and generally think about moving forward. Generally, code operates inside of a process, right? Processes can create another process to do something. This would be a child process. Child processes can only have one parent. Parents can have more than one child. These are just quick little remembers, or for people who aren't CS, some things to look out for as we start digging into these memory files. Code on Windows is executed typically through exe or DLL files, DLLs being dynamically linked libraries. and it's typically executed directly through the command line or other binaries. It's common for attackers to run malware as a DLL because those can be dynamically linked in our system. And it's harder to detect whether or not that's malware. And malware can hide in executable scripting languages like PowerShell or JScript or VBScript or PowerShell. And so now we can move into setup. Maybe we do a 5-minute break, Bernie? Sweet. Everybody's going to need to access their Linux system. That is Amazon Workspaces. And then we'll get into setup. If Austin's here, he can help. I have instructions that we'll list out, but let's take a 5-minute break. And then we'll start to get into the hands-on portion.
I didn't see the, yeah.
You guys did? Okay.
Yeah. I heard the-
I'm not gonna want like a Windows.
And it just says that, yeah, it says that have a. No, I listened to.
Yeah, there will be steps. But you're on. Will be internal. So. Yeah.
I've been.
I love Microsoft. Okay, I don't use Safari, I use Firefox. Okay.
It's a lot.
No.
Oh, actually, I don't know.
So they don't have a computer charger,
What do you
computer
need?
charger.
Wait, long time.
Something about it.
USB-C?
Yes.
Google.
Thank you very much. Um,
Oh, no, great. Hey, here. Oh. Do not.
I'm trying.
Nice. Oh.
Oh.
Right.
I'm running all my files.
Yeah.
I'm running my files on the website. The virus.
Oh,
What is
no.
it? COVID or not COVID? Well,
Yeah, well, that was, so.
Are you getting?
Yeah.
Screw you, Pop.
Yeah.
I can download it. Right, sign in. I put in workspace, comes up with an error. But I would more concerned about like doing stuff myself.
Do you have that?
We're trying to get a couple other people.
Yep.
I'm
Yeah.
also having problems, but for me, it's. I'm a computer scientist, so.
Either.
You're watching. You're not either.
No, I am. But those, all four of my students
Or not. They're gonna follow along anyway.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is still,
Yeah, so-
I have instructions and things that are gonna make. You're not making it easy, but at least give enough background into how to
Yeah,
use. How to navigate the command line for those of us who haven't, because I know even some students don't navigate the command line very often. So we'll go through that and play around with some real memory files.
Sounds good.
Hopefully, it's not too.
I thought this was the next session.
Yeah. Hey, yeah. I remember having fun with it too. We decided not to use magnet because of the technical facilities of it, had to get licensing. It's also huge.
Yeah, took a while to download last year.
Yeah, I mean, this setup hopefully doesn't take too long. I'd rather just streamline it.
You're gonna be here. Okay, then you'll be here next year.
Probably, yeah. No, I'm a master's in roots, so I will get my master's. Because the requirements for a PhD and it seems like the cost requirements if you have a master's are the exact same. So I'm
Basically.
doing those requirements, getting a degree along the way.
You might as well get the master.
I'm doing the work for it, right?
Not everyone, are you gonna do a thesis though? As well?
Courses only is offered at.
Of course,
I was,
Of course, with masters.
Yeah.
I was looking at Jack.
Oh, put it on your resume.
I was like. And then they pick the piece and just expand.
We should come up with this, and then you walk in.
Yeah, I'm logged in on my laptop. So, okay. Yeah, I have my Amazon workspaces. My laptop.
Yeah, it's much more effective.
Remind me about that.
I will be bringing it right back in. I have those.
Yeah.
I was gonna take.
I really don't. Like I said, at the beginning, I am not a analyst. I am just a
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe like my friend, might be trying those, like might be mismatches. Totally.
Windows Fire once I had them logged in to allow the Amazon workspaces.
Mine's working. I had to put in the new registration code. Yeah. So then we have to download it. Okay.
Actually, I got in there.
Somebody want to buy a computer?
Yeah.
Alright, so then.
So you did last name first, right? Can you log in from, two of them use mine? Or you just?
Yeah. I got the, I'm sitting there on the, so something's out. Should I just send them the rest of it? We have a.
I want you to.
I love those.
Yeah.
That's spicy.
That's not gonna work. I'm sure you can.
We try to account for.
I'm gonna do it.
I'm pretty sure these
Yeah. I will go. Is that what you need?
I originally wanted also.
Not easy.
Students for all this year. At the same time.
Yeah, you got it.
So there's one.
Yeah.
They won't relax.
Cool. All right, everybody, we're going to get started. For YouTube, apparently it's going to take a bit to get the machines actually up and running, so we're going to start the setup. And Austin will help you when you guys get it working. Okay. So some quick commands that we're going to need to know for those of you who haven't worked in Linux, or for those of you who have never used terminal. CD, it means change directory. So you will do CD and then the directory name or the folder name, and that will move you into that directory. So if we're in our home directory and we want to get into documents, we'll do CD documents, right? And that'll move us into there. LS will list all the files in that directory, so you can see what is actually in the folder you're looking at. CD ... is going to move us up a directory. So if we're in documents and we want to go back into the home directory, we'll do CD ... CD space ... and that'll step us back up into the home directory. Make dir is going to become, that's going to be helpful when we start actually doing the labs. So make dir plus whatever directory name you want to have is going to create a new directory or create a new folder if you're looking in the file system, right? Cool. So first things first, everybody who has a Linux workspace, everybody's logged in, right? We're good? I did check, making sure we're all good. So we need to open terminal and start running some of these commands. Again, for those of you who haven't worked in Linux, sudo stands for super user do. That is basically gives us administrator privileges. So and I will help out at least. Right, so the sudo yum update, I'm gonna go sudo and terminal is this guy right here. Right here. So if you haven't gotten there, if you haven't opened terminal, this button right here, this guy is terminal. And you will have to enter your password on Linux when you are entering your password for it's not going to show anything. It's not going to show any dots or any dashes or anything like that. You're just going to have to enter your password correctly and hit enter. If you enter it wrong like I just did, it'll tell you you did it wrong.
You want us to just do this on the PowerPoint?
Yep. Yep, and we'll move on to the other ones. There will be more instructions. No. When you type in sudo yum update, this command right here, that is going to update the packages in our system. Yep. And it'll ask you for your password. And like I said, it's not going to give you any dots or anything else, right? Like that, you enter your password. I got it right.
Yeah, you're sure.
Like that. Mine's are. For those of you who are getting down to this command right here, where we're installing certain things, if it says package not found, ignore it. I did these commands for a different Linux operating system. Some of these packages are already available in the Amazon Linux, which I think is running off of some version of CentOS.
Is this okay?
If it asks for you to say yes or no, say yes. Yeah. Yeah, so Austin and I spent some time figuring this out. I think all of the packages I renamed in this. And I also added OpenSSL because that was the only one that we had issues with. If you see differences. Yeah. No, I'm saying like if you see some where I've messed up copying it over, please let me know. Has everybody done everything here? No? Oh, yeah, take your time. I want to make sure that everybody has done what's on the slides before we move on to the next slide. It'll go faster like that, even if it feels like it's not. You're good? Natalie, are you good? Cool. This is going to be a long one. I'll get my thing out of the way. Most of these packages will probably not be found, so I do apologize for that.
Are your slides somewhere that I can just copy that on?
Sorry. My apologies. And most of these, again, won't be found, and that's not a problem. I mean, I could have, but
I know.
I mean, if you want, you can break them up. You can just do sudo yum install each one individually. You don't have to put it all in one line. Yes, but you're gonna have to do a right click.
Control Shift 8.
The package won't install if it is not. Nice to meet you. Thank you for all your help. Oh, yeah.
And then the following.
None of us actually show up.
Wait, this.
Yeah.
Oh.
Nice.
None of these factors.
Perfect. All right, everybody typed it out?
Wait, we don't have to.
You said it's okay if it says.
Yeah.
More or less.
I'm gonna read these off.
Yep. It looks like none of them were there. Sorry, everybody. Skip it. For those of you who haven't. Nope. So. Yeah, thanks, man.
This is just because you didn't know exactly what system.
Right, yeah, I got, so these are for the most part commands for Ubuntu. And Amazon, our workspaces are sent, different operating system. There we go. All right, everybody ready to move on? We didn't really have to do that. We need to download Yara from the tar vault. So everybody go to this website and just when you're there, let me know when you get there. You'll do that in Firefox. The next slide is going to have a picture with an arrow pointing to the file you want to download. For those of you who get there faster and know what tar is, you want to download the .tar file.
This is the source code one.
Yep, source code tar.jz. Oh, we'll get there in a second. Just need to download it for now. We don't need to, we'll open it in a minute using command line tools.
Wait, were we supposed to do that like,
Don't worry, your computer's just building malware now, don't worry.
Yeah, this is supposed to be done in your Linux system. Do this in your Amazon workspace.
oh. Okay.
Everything we're doing is going to be in the Amazon workspace. So just pretend that is your actual computer. Is everybody good with the website? No?
Yeah.
Not
Not yet.
yet. Okay.
Just save it, not open.
Yeah, just save the file you download. We'll open it up in a second.
I gotta extract what's the build plan.
We'll get there. I want to make sure everybody's on the same page. Is everybody good with the address? Cool. Has everybody downloaded this file somewhere? Right? Everybody good? Cool. So we're going to, we want to use our CD, right, our change directory, to go to where this file was downloaded. So Sorry. So we probably want to be in downloads. That's probably where the file went. So CD downloads, and then you're going to enter this command right here. This is going to unzip the file. And if anybody needs help, please raise your hand. Either Austin and I will come over and help out. You need it. CDs, this directory.
It's CD cases.
Yes. So, here are then we can tar. Yeah. X after. There. So, oh, right there. You don't need to elevate numbers from there.
But we use
Yes.
and there's no.
Who's been able to extract the tar file? You. Everybody else, you guys extract the tar file? Good, okay. All right, next step, CD, change directory, get into the newly extracted Yara directory. I think Yara is going to be one of the most complicated things we're going to be installing. Huh? You know, hopefully. Once we get this up. Then. Oh. I got them to glass. Oh, seriously? Take care. Oh my gosh. Here.
Well, just do.
Right, we need to install.
Now
That's my favorite part.
Enough.
Don't forget to sell all of these installed. Thanks, Kurt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If everybody gets through all of this, give me a thumbs up.
Alright, try this.
Wait a second.
That question. Find open SSL. Great. You got one more command direct before dot slash configure. Say again?
No, just /configure.
No, they need open SSL, right?
No. Well, we will eventually, but
Do you want to build it with open SSL?
I don't.
You know it's not going to target. It doesn't have the header files to build it with open SSL. I'm building.
So you didn't install, did you download the, oh, you did, Yara, where are you?
Yeah, I used to do it. It's kind of long. I got figured out.
Yeah. Oh, down here. Error 1, undefined reference. Yes, verify CTX setting. Yara.so.
Yes.
All right, let's see.
I'm not sure where it,
Downloaded it first in the wrong place.
where'd you download it to?
I downloaded it on my regular computer, not the workspace. But that shouldn't matter, right? Then I downloaded it on here.
Do you remember where you,
Firefox. Yeah,
oh, you did, okay.
yeah, I did. Just download it. Looks like.
I can see it here. But I don't.
Undefined reference.
Say why I crashed.
Oh, doesn't work. What? Doesn't have open SSL.
The mystery right there.
Yeah, let's re-download it.
I got you.
Oh, that's probably it. It probably just opened it. So now we should be able to CD into downloads. There it is. Yeah.
Then I need to look at it.
And then I just did the tar command for it. Has everybody made it this far?
Yeah.
Are we all good?
Yeah.
Everybody, oh, not.
Oh, what is that? Yeah.
It's pretty fast.
It says auto recomp not sound. All right, for those of you who have gotten it working, run and make check, please. And if we get all green, pass, 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 and Yara has been installed and built correctly. Yep. Yeah, let it run through. Wait until you.
Dollar sign? There we go. Once you get the dollar sign, just run the echo.
Huh?
Once you get the dollar sign, run the echo.
Yeah, once everything's passed, we obviously don't have any errors, please, God. We can run the echo command. This is mostly just to check, it's a double check that Yara is working. We shouldn't need to do any sort of LD config.
Command not found.
Oh, I spelled it.
Yeah, don't type in test Yara. Type in the echo. All my features. Yeah, yeah. Don't type the stuff in bold. We're just typing echo.
So we're just, I've done not something.
Yeah, so we're testing Yara.
Everything that's not full.
What's the one?
Yara, it's a program that makes volatility. I don't actually remember exactly what it does, but I know that volatility doesn't work that.
So like.
Is it good, Austin?
Not yet.
Not yet.
So I built it without OpenSSL, right? I found out what package does install OpenSSL. It's OpenSSL devel, not live OpenSSL-dev, right? But when you do that, it will run into later errors because whatever version of OpenSSL is available here isn't compatible with Yara most likely. So I had to go do a make clean, uninstall OpenSSL devel, and build it again.
Are you just getting the?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically what you have to do is when you execute the echo command, that's just basically creating text. So you see that arrow at the end? That's an IO redirection symbol. And basically what you're doing is you're taking that text.
Yo.
Directly out from my first rule. And then you want to execute that command first. And then on the second, like once the new command line opens up, then you do Yara microschool space microschool, and it should output dummy microschool.
Yeah.
Did you space?
So these are two different commands. Echo first, That one first, sorry. And then,
Oh, yeah, I.
That's what I did.
So doing space. and-
we're definitely throwing y'all.
Yeah, I just.
Yar space.
Yes. Yara space.
I also like it.
Yeah.
But I did it with.
And then you want to the IO directions. Or did you already make that? No, this is just. So this is from it. Before you do that, you gotta sit it down. Let's remove the original, like, dummy file. Or just try to get to a point. Oh, yeah, okay, then just try to go back. Yeah, that actually helps. And we'll type in lowercase r,
Right there.
space, micro, just do my as out.
Oh.
So that way we get rid of that file. Go to the echo, quotation rule step again, up to the last quotation. And then, where you at? Quotation mark, space, right, that right here. And then my first rule. Oh, yeah, well, sorry, that's, yeah, I have to do that. That's done. Alright, so now you create your micro schools.
So they should be doing.
Now you just do your micro schools. Yeah. Now that file exists, there we go. Yeah, they did. There you go. Now the micro school works.
I have no space.
What about short of space?
Space. That's that. Yeah.
For those of you potentially having trouble with testing the Yara rule, we're first going to run the echo rule dummy, condition true, greater than sign, my first rule.
And you have to have the spaces in the right place, like those spaces. I'm not doing that. Oh, I take it back that.
Yeah.
I get back that.
You hit enter.
I want to get back that.
Control. Jump you out. Who has gotten a dummy rule? Everybody good? Dummy rule, everybody? No. Casey does not have dummy rule. So did you run that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you run Yara, my first rule?
Yeah.
I don't have to think of that.
We're good. Everybody. Doing this last double check. Everybody got a dummy roll working?
Yes.
Cool. Move on. Austin, these all looking good, more or less? You remember?
I think they only need to do the last one.
Only need to do TZ data?
Back one.
Yeah, sorry.
I guess have them do all of it.
Cool. All right, everybody. We're moving on to this. We're installing Python 2.7. Yes, it should install where it's supposed to be, even if it's in the same directory. But if you need to, just go ahead and type in CD and click enter. That'll take you back to the home directory.
That two different lines again,
This is one line.
when I-
Yeah.
Why did already do this install? Oh, great.
This is where Star or Star are not the same.
And it's not going to conflict with the path.
No, these are wrappers. Saturday. We're also going to start installing Yara Python. Wow. Yes, this is all one line. The last one, the echo dummy rule, that was my mistake. If there are no packages, there are no packages. I think probably only one.
There are two already installed.
Cool. Even better.
No package are available.
Yeah. Like I said, all of these instructions have just been barely modified from Ubuntu. This is all one line. This is all one line.
Definitely should not do a workshop to get you guys to try out some generative AI tools. I don't want to.
With no package available, we're fine.
Yeah, because I don't want to walk people through conduct.
I love conduct.
Or the really, really weird trick I have to do in order to get GPU and TensorFlow working on Ion Windows machine. Because
Oh, God.
like it's looking for a very specific file path for the GPU driver, right? And like, although the GPU driver is backwards compatible in terms of like, if you have a version 12 or something, it can work with the version 11, right? It has the APIs for doing it, but if TensorFlow is like, has the file name hard coded for the entire file path, and it's looking for version 11, it's not going to work with version 12, right? Even though it does have that backwards compatibility. So you actually have to move or copy the driver over into a subdirectory of like the local directory of your program so that it will find it there.
Sounds like a pain.
Yes, it works, but you're like, I spent weeks trying to figure out how to actually get this thing to work. It's all I had to
That's
do.
how I feel about volatility. Huh? Doing the second line? Don't you do this. I think the second line is probably more important than the first. Good. Everybody good with this slide? Cool. Moving on. Need to get Pip.
We did this in the same thing or at Firefox?
No. You fill this line out.
Okay.
Curl in terminal. You're going to type curl. You're going to type in the HTTPS get pip.py -- output get -pip.py. All of that is one line. All of this is one line.
If we install Python already, should we have it?
You know what you think, but no, not necessarily.
If I just type in pip install and that's done. Actually, just don't pick that.
You shouldn't be go.
I don't know which version that is.
It can be version specific.
Yeah. We're also getting the hit for Python 2.7, not Python 3. So that's
Yeah,
what this curl is doing.
Command Python, and it will go with Python to do. And it like Linux explicitly
Yes.
requires.
Is there a dash?
Python 3.
Before the two dash, or is there a space before the two dashes?
Yes.
Okay.
Can we go on the deprecation warning?
Yes, ignore the deprecation warning. Python 2.7 isn't supported. Python 3 is the thing that everybody is supposed to be using now, but if we're going to be using volatility 2 at all, we can't use Python 3. It only is for Python 2. Yeah. Come back. Come back.
Wait, no, the wrong one. Andrew, no, please. I beg you.
Come back. Please don't cry. Not yet. And Austin, is it the OpenSSL or is it the OpenSSL-dev? -dev. Okay.
Oh, devel.
Devel.
Right.
Got it. When you get to OpenSSL, I forgot to add, you need to add a -devel, -devel.
It's already installed.
OpenSSL is already installed. We need OpenSSL devel.
Type it out again, and then -EVL.
You just press the up arrow.
Slash data.
Dash.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just like most of the
Got it. No package.
Download this, run it, and install it.
Open SSL, I should talk about that.
No package available?
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I told you. Not in. Oh, I got We didn't actually know. Yes.
There you go.
Yeah.
Who's all gotten this far? Are we good? Everybody good? Other than good? Steps getting there. Let's get thumbs up. 7 and move on.
You know what?
Good. Zach?
So Java Python twice.
I don't remember the exact reason.
No, we got this Python 2.7.
Yep. Yep. And I'll be right back, Austin, if you just want to see if anybody make sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I should probably go. So.
Actually, I need you to, Sam, need you to do this step as well. We did this, you need to do these two commands. Who's all got this one going? Sorry, this is quite the process to get volatility installed. This one? Wait for him to take a picture.
This was great.
Correct, yes.
Is the other Python one after the open SSL call?
This,
You didn't even push
Austin, do you have everybody's email?
Yeah.
Do you still have?
Science.
Yeah. Huh?
After I did that.
These, yeah, yep. Probably should have done this again, but. No, no, I got it.
Is that the previous slide?
Yeah, this is the previous slide. All right. I sent you steps. Probably should have done that to begin with. All right. You should be getting an email in a second, so you can just copy and paste some of these commands. This is already taking a lot longer than I had anticipated. I want you guys to be able to follow along with some of the things. Is everybody good for this? Yep. So we need to create a symbolic link between libyara.so and a place in user lib. So libyara.so is a file that volatility is going to go looking for in user lib/libyara. Mine is installed in user local lib. I assume yours is as well. You can go and look for that, but the email just went out. Sweet. Email just went out. You guys should be able to copy and paste some of these commands into the thing. Oh, look. Different dependencies. But the time constraints.
There we go.
Huh?
I got it down.
Don't type the things in bold.
No, I just typed in the second.
This one?
Same with mine, I think.
You need a space.
We're not all,
I just got a password.
Now they're going from
Oh, I know what.
You're done. If you did not hit any, if it didn't have anything, that means it's approved. You don't need to type it. In Linux.
Enter your slide discrepancy. On the document and on the slide. These also pretty strong.
All the ones on the slides, not necessarily on the document. Back and send it to the document.
Yeah.
still doing that now?
Yes.
Let me go back.
So,
It says this is genuine cost.
Whoa. So,
and try to get. Who has the document and is copying things from the document? Anybody? Austin sent you a email. Yeah, a new email with things that you can just copy and paste. Yeah, it's the same. It should be the same instructions here. But
No, the same document used to have.
yeah, the same document we sent out a few minutes ago. Everybody have access to that. We're going to skip the volatility too because we're running out of time, and I want to show you guys some actual stuff instead of spending it all doing setup. Go on to the volatility 3 once you have installed Python 3 and volatility 3 dependencies.
Wait, so after we did what's on the board, then we started up the document?
I'll keep moving things down for the slides, but the document is everything. It's all the same setup instructions from what I put on the slides. However, because I want us to actually be able to do some memory forensics instead of spending all of this doing setup, we're going to skip step 10 in the document and go on to step 11 and just install volatility 3.
Is 92 step 9?
So we're talking about step 10 of the document. So 92, we're installing Python 3. We are going to keep doing, we still are going to install all of these. We're not doing this. Start deleting things in the slides.
Are we still doing step 9?
Still do step 9.
I got a big fat error.
What kind of error?
Error, command error out when exit status 1.
So sure, copy and paste, you can copy and paste this. Like,
Okay.
Oh, when you
Yeah.
Andrew.
Yes.
Sorry, I just got the doc. Lunch. Did you already delete the one over there?
For the most part, yes. Yeah.
Jump.
Sorry. Yeah, I got rid of the volatility one. We're just doing volatility 3 now. And I'll make that larger in a second. Sorry.
Is that what you do?
Yeah, except doesn't know.
And
Yes.
on step 9 on the document, there's another one where it's just 3 and it needs to be 3.8.
Okay.
In case everybody knows.
Which one was it?
Step 9,
Austin?
Python 3-M should be Python 3.8.
Yep, you were correct.
I got an error on getting this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the one where.
Yeah.
Is that the error you're getting, Austin? Storm 3?
It works with the this one. Yeah.
You're in your. Step 10, yes. On the document, yes, we are doing step 10. Step 10 is what we're doing. So make sure you're in the home directory. You just do CD and enter. CT, yes. Change director. I pray for okay.
And I got a service still there.
I didn't get
He's a boy running setup guy.
We got it.
So, oh, great. I gotta be this way. I wonder. Is this a freaking typo? The person who wrote this module made a typo in their previous, it's looking for python.h, right? But it's got a capital T, and I'm thinking, if this guy,
Do I do that?
you know what? Maybe the person who wrote this library was on freaking Windows and it didn't have a problem with the NTFS file system. And then this thing got ported to Linux and then like,
So I didn't.
Perfect. That we're gonna have to do, I'm gonna add that to the document.
Hold on.
Yep,
We're doing, so step 10, just keep on doing.
yep, I deleted the volatility 2 stuff. So just get volatility 3. If no errors for when you do the volatility 3, then everything's great. And you can go to this tiny URL and download some of the lab material that we're going to be working through. So it seems like some people are getting volatility 3 working. If you get volatility 3 downloaded and working, if you could please go and help somebody else who does not have volatility 3 up and running. That would be great.
Well, I can get this out. Yeah, I can make this bigger, actually.
Also, don't install anything, don't download the tiny URL into the volatility 3 stuff. There's going to be, yeah, the last thing. Make sure that you go back to your home directory, CD enter. When you've installed volatility.
I went to Firefox
Yeah, the Firefox works.
and I.
Perfect. No worries. No worries. Oh, well. Excellent. You did. Excellent. Oh, God bless. I'll even walk.
I
So that now, make sure you.
Yeah, and then just follow on that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I think so. Who has volatility 3 installed?
I think
Who has it?
done all these steps.
Yeah, done all, but it's not working with a couple of plugins like the Yaroscan one.
Yeah, some of those are, might not get loaded. That's more or less.
Like, with those things, obviously, it's like not work, but, Yaroscan doesn't work when you, on it, it says, can't find lots of Yara.
I hope that's not gonna be an issue.
Did you guys do a CD feature yet?
Yeah, I know you said. Yeah, that's fine. I think most people have it working.
Ooh, that was fun.
Right there. All right.
It's on the screen.
So who's got volatility 3 installed? Who has gone to that tiny URL and installed the labs and extracted it somewhere? Or not installed, download the labs, sorry. Is it downloading? Tiny URL working. Right there. I mean, hopefully not. Some people's it seemed like it went really fast, but I was,
Maybe it's just over here.
it might just be mad that so many people are trying to install it at once or download it at once.
How do we extract it, or is that same thing as download?
You should be able to, once you open it, you should be able to double click. It will be an extract.
I click save.
Yeah.
All right, to help people out who are trying to extract it, I'm gonna go to downloads and double click file we downloaded or the zip file we downloaded, right? And we're gonna get this up here. We have the extract button. Click that. We're gonna just throw that in the home directory because it's easy. And then down here at the bottom, we'll click extract. Okay? Good?
But I think you are right, we were on that. And then it's download.
created this freaking file on a Mac. So that's a freaking DS4 file there.
All right. It is 4 o'clock. We are going to move on and actually do some memory forensics. Yes. So let's see where. Still here somewhere. Yeah. And because we are a little more pressed for time, we're going to dive into one of the actual labs and see some of the fun digital forensic stuff we can do. So we're going to dive right into this. Lab 2. An employee reported that their machine started acting strangely after receiving a suspicious email with a document file. What malicious processes are running on the image? So I know it's been a while, but does anybody remember some of the plugins I mentioned that might potentially give us malicious files?
That's, or I guess it's not
Maybe.
files, it's not.
Malfind. So we're going to get into lab 2, CD into lab 2, and we're also going to CD into eCorp office, right? For those of you who are going to follow along. If you don't feel like following along, you can just watch and we will. So it took longer than I was anticipating, so. So we have a couple of memory files. We've got the VMem file and the VMSS file, right? So we're going to use volatility on the VMem file, and because we want to see what malicious processes are running, we're going to go and type in Python 3, right? And we can do this squiggle. Anybody? Right? This is going to let us type in volatility 3. And the file we're going to be running, the volatility file, which is vol.py. Volatility 3, vol.py, yeah. Then we're going to do -F to give it a file. WinCorp, VMem. And now we can do Windows.malfind. So if we run this, volatility is going to do its thing, sift through the VMem file, and then start spitting out some stuff, spitting out some processes that are potentially malicious. Right? So we've got this search filter, Outlook. It's saying potentially could have malicious things. Well, we're seeing a fishy email. Outlook.exe. We've got Skype C2 auto updater. C2, that seems C2 kind of suspicious, right? That reminds us of command and control maybe a little bit of how they would potentially keep communication with the device. So let's say we want to pull down the malicious process. We want to do, say, we're going to do a dump process so that we can get all the files associated. With our potentially malicious process. So to do that, we're going to want to make a directory. Call it, I'm just going to call it bad DMP, right? We see that bad DMP exists right there. We just made that. That's where we're going to send our output. So from there, we're going to do our volatility again, our bad file or our memory file. Going to do, I have these commands filled out for myself. dash, let's say it's dash O. There we go. Yeah. We're going to do dash O. This is just us telling the telling volatility where to send these files. Then Windows dot memmap. Oh crap! Nope. I made the mistake. I said that you guys shouldn't do it. We need to enter the process ID. Otherwise, we're going to be dumping every single process. For that, it was 1364.
It's not stop that.
Command Z or Control Z for design.
Would also be these programs. in Windows.
You could install volatility in Windows or Mac. Mac would be pretty much all of the same commands, more or less, that you would do for Linux, because Mac is built on a Unix machine. I don't know how you would install it on Windows, but you could. It is cross-platform.
I just figured since.
Well, and we're using the Windows dot for all of our plugins because the memory file that we have is from a Windows machine.
What was that command?
Oh, yeah.
Was it all dash O and dash N?
Yes, dash O, and then you put in the directory. And then we're going to do Windows and map dash dash PID, and then we're going to put in the process ID that is potentially malicious.
Just the feedback file.
Yeah, we used, or I didn't, but the person who supplied me with these files. The vmem file is the RAM capture that somebody did. So they had a running system, they did a RAM capture. After somebody said, hey, we have this got a suspicious email, right? So. Does everybody check this out? Who wants to check this out? Cool. So if we go into that DMP, supposedly there's supposed to be something in there because of our output file. Mine didn't want to do it. Maybe I entered it wrong. Sorry, wait. So I think I entered that command wrong. My apologies. I will go and see what the command actually is, but these are all the files that you would get should the dump process work, right? So most of these are going to be DLLs. What we want to take a look at is this file right here, either one of these EXEs, either the exe.dat or the exe image. Once we've gotten this file, we can actually pull up Firefox and go to VirusTotal, the website I was mentioning earlier. And in virus total, we can we can take in virus total, we can drag these files in, drop them into virus total, and see whether or not something's malicious. Skype 2, maybe it's not malicious. I'm not seeing anything weird going on here. Let's try the other one. One security vendor said that this potentially could be malware. And this right here is the hash of the file, right? So we don't really see much in virus total. We can potentially run a command called strings on
These are in Microsoft's portable executable format, though. And if you run strings, you're going to be looking for an ELF file. Do you have like x86 W64 strings?
I don't know.
You need to try that.
So yeah. Sorry, everybody. I am just going to move us on into, so Skype is going to be our malicious, Skype is going to be our malicious process. I forget the actual command. I did all of these, but the past hour of trying to get this set up was maybe a little bit frazzled, so I apologize. Let's go ahead and run netscan on our vmem file and try to see volatility 3, hold up high. Windows.netscan. So this is good. Netscan is going to show us all the connections in our memory file. All the connections at the time of ours that we took this snapshot. So mine's going to run a little faster because I've run netscan already, but it's going to start outputting the connections with our local address, local port, where it's going, process ID, et cetera, et cetera. So we can see what ports are listening, which ones are open, where they're coming from, the ID, and the IP addresses. So we can see that Skype C2 auto updater is using this IP address right here. So this, using netscan, we can see what ports are listening. We can potentially see whether or not a port is listening where it shouldn't be, or something has been turned on. SBC host, this is service host. In one of the other labs, it's up and running. It's been another process initiated as opposed to services. Services.exe is the one that typically opens SBC host, which is something that we can see is potentially fishy. So let's go and try to figure out who sent this phishing email. So we've got our, I'm going to run PS list. just going to list out all of our processes. If we're going to be taking a look at emails that have been sent, and for anybody who is following along wants to, that's the command. If we're going to want to look at emails that have been sent, we're going to want to take a look at our Outlook file, right? Our Outlook file shows 2692 as our process ID. The process is the one that is running Outlook, right? 2692 is running Outlook. So we can, I'm going to cheat a little bit. So you guys aren't seeing this. Dash done. That's what I did. So we want to, we're going to do -O. Actually, I'm going to make a new directory for this. Make dir bad email, right? Then we're going to start out the same way we have in the past for running volatility commands. We are going to do the -O, and then we're going to do windows.memmap --dump -PID, and then our malicious, or not malicious, our email process ID was 2692. Oh. No. It's oh, I did not give it the output. So this will take a second to run. What it's going to output is this file that we can see it sending everything to pid.2692.dmp. This is going to this is going to be all the information associated with Outlook. So once this is run, we can actually, we're going to use that command I tried to use earlier and didn't use well. We're going to use strings to try to see who sent an email, right? So we're going to type in strings. Strings is going to give us all of the different string types in our DMP file. Actually, we're going to go into that email. So there's our process ID dump file. We're going to go strings PID 2692 DMP, and we're going to do this straight up and down line. The straight up and down line is called a, we're going to pipe the output of strings to another command. The other command we're going to do is grep. We're going to grep, this is us looking for a specific something, grep from, because we're trying to figure out who sent the phishing email in Outlook. So that gives us some options. But up here, we see that, somebody named Karen Miles sent an email, and we only have, we really only have the one person sending an email in our Outlook. We received a phishing email. So we know that Karen Miles is probably the person who sent our phishing email. And we got that just by dumping everything from the Outlook process into a file, and then running our nice little strings command and looking for from, right? So now we know who sent the phishing email. Let's try to find the hash of the document, or try to find the document itself, right? So what we're going to do to start looking for the document, we know who it's from, we know that a phishing email was sent in Outlook, but we don't have any of the files from Outlook. So we're going to run, the next command we're going to run is dump files. After we go up, make another directory, bad emails to, right? We don't want to flood the directory we are in with all the files. So dump proc or memmap just gives us a single dump file. Dump files is going to dump everything associated with a specific process, right? So let's go here. I'm going to change, I think we can get rid of dump. We're going to do dump files. And we're going to send that to bad emails too. That should work. And that's these are all files associated with the process, with the Outlook process. And it's going to take a while to get everything. But I mentioned earlier that we've got our PST files. PST files are what we can get emails from, right? That's how Microsoft stores emails. That's how Microsoft stores calendar things. And thankfully, we've got this cool tool called Goldfinch that we can go and take a look at and give it a PST file after we finish running dump files and get everything output. And like I mentioned earlier, volatility has so many different plugins to do so many different things. I think Malfind is really cool, but there are a lot of false positives with Malfind, right? What you can do is with Malfind is you've got these exe files, right? It has spit out a bunch of things that are potentially malicious. We can start plugging those into VirusTotal and see if any of them pop up. If not, we're going to have to dig a little deeper to see whether or not something seems a little fishy and look into things like the Outlook files or whatnot. So we're gonna go into bad files with bad emails really quick, just to show you how many files were output from the dump files process. A lot of dynamically linked libraries, but really what we are interested in are any sort of PST files, right? This is where we can get, maybe not creative, but we can make things a little easier on ourselves by just going into the GUI, opening up bad emails to, and doing a Control F for PST files. These are all the different PST files that we pulled out. One problem that we get when we do a dump file of Outlook and we're just wanting PST files, Goldfinch is not going to be able to figure out that this is a PST file if we have the .dat or the .vcap at the end. We can just go ahead and rename that. There it is. Rename that and delete the DAT or the vcap. It's still the same file. We just are getting rid of that file tag. And I forget what DAT actually is. We're going to pull up Firefox again and go to Goldfinch. Goldfinch PST. There we are. And I'm going to open a PST. These are the same files, I just pulled them out earlier when I was making sure that volatility was still working. So we're going to open all of those. If we go here, open it up, we can actually take a look at the inbox of our Outlook process. We, just by using the volatility command and typing in dump files, getting all of that, I removed the DAT, and then we plug the PST files. Plug the PST files into Goldfinch, and now we can actually see the inbox of our corporate employee. So right here, we've got eCoin invoice. And you can see that there's an attachment, and it is from our Fisher, Miss Karen Miles. And well, thank you for your invoice. We appreciate your business, or we have your invoice. I'm going to go ahead and save this file. I'm not going to open this file because we think it's malicious, right? We're going to save that. Going to go to virus total. We're going to go to virus total, our downloads. We have bank statement here. That's what we just downloaded. And we're just going to drop that into virus total and see if it finds anything. Well, heck, 34 people or 34 vendors are like, this is bad. This is a malicious file. And if we're looking for the MD5 hash, there's our hash right up top. So our next step is, what is the Bitcoin address for the ransom payment? Well, we already have our entire inbox pulled up here, right? So down here, we can see ransom request as an email that was sent. And here is our nice, happy little ransom. This is not a joke. Our attacks are extremely powerful ransom requests. You need to send Bitcoin to our Bitcoin address right here.
Why would you say
I am not in the mind of an attacker.
unironically, there are email services you can run that are on Tor. Like,
So there are some of the things that you can do. I think I might run through one or two more interesting things. We're going to go into lab 1, right? So lab 1, we've got our memory.mem file. If we're going to show the running processes, Python 3, we did this already, but volatility 3, vol.py, and then we're going to run this on memory.mem. Maybe. Oh, yeah, that's on me. Windows.ps list. This will give us all the running processes in memory.mem. Maybe. Okay. I don't know why my system is certainly not working. Well, I have to figure that out. I'm sorry, everybody. But hopefully you've at least seen some of the things we can do with volatility. I'm sorry that setup took so long. And hopefully you learned at least something about digital forensics. I apologize that we had some technical difficulties and some issues, but I think we'll call it there. Yeah, any questions? Anything that I could potentially answer for you guys? Yeah.
Really still your job to take the class.
So I took a class with Clem, my advisor. He teaches a advanced software engineering course. And the last 4 or 5 weeks of it, they actually bring in the person I said thank you to at the beginning of this, Will Peteroy, and he teaches all of this. Yeah. Volatility also gave us trouble in the class as well. So apparently it just does not like to work in front of people. Anybody else? Yeah.
Do you know of any good resources for getting into different areas of digital forensics?
DFIR, let's see, I think I actually might have, let's see. I have a bunch of slides, but there, if you look up DFIR, that means Digital Forensics and Incident Response. I think there are some resources out there. There are some conferences and whatnot that also DFIR conferences. Yeah, DFIR summit and training. I would take a look at those. If you want to play around with distant forensics, Magnet, I think, is one of them. And if anybody wants the instructions for installing volatility on an Ubuntu system, I can absolutely send those out. You can try to get that working for yourself.
One question. So I'm sending things I suspect that it's a machine. I send it to use.com and the machine. Something like that.
I think we do. Yes.
You know, those people are going to do what you are to identify the person or just playing that say.
Austin, do you have any idea? No.
I doubt they would.
Yeah. Well, if there is a phishing email and it is being sent to a suspicious, like they're wanting you to click on a suspicious link or download a suspicious file, you can throw those into VirusTotal and it will tell you whether or not it is malware that has been seen, right? So VirusTotal doesn't just take an executable, it doesn't just take a doc file, right? It'll take pretty much any file, URL, or malicious something or other. It'll tell you if it's bad.
It's called what again?
VirusTotal. That's this guy that we were throwing things into. So yeah, so when we took the bank statement doc that was sent, we put it into VirusTotal, and it was saying that 34 security vendors have said this is a malicious document. This is bad. We do not like it. So if you're ever actually suspicious of something and you're not just going to go through the route of saying this is sketchy, delete the email, you can throw it into VirusTotal and see if anybody's seen it.
You can also just like throw links in there, like say an email just sends you a link, you copy the link. For what I saw on there.
Yes, yes, you can. Yeah, you can send URLs as well. If we're, let's see, there is. What it is. You can there was one thing I wanted to show, and I don't remember where it went, but you can use the strings command to take a look at whether or not, like if you dump a process, you can use the strings command to grep for JAB. JAB is a base 64 encoding for a variable declaration. Once that's going to give you a bunch of different outputs, but you might get a base 64 string of letters and numbers and whatnot that you can put into CyberChef, and CyberChef can de-encode that or decode that for you. But since volatility has decided to suddenly stop working for me, I can't actually show you that, which is unfortunate. Any more questions? Thank you guys for your patience.